given our previous critiques, it's probably pretty fair to say that you are that bad. I very rarely walk out of them unscathed.
Oh, hopefully it's worth it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
That or you stuck 20 levels because you're a glutton for punishment. One of the two.
Well, that's probably true also.
It's both.
So we should get started.
Yeah, I'm ready when you are. Take the lead.
Well, you changed my level 19 critique from sort of a comprehensive critique to seeing a collection of 10 images. So I went out and I shot that, and I've titled the collection Fundamental Attribution Error. It's an exploration kind of inspired a little bit by Rumi's parable of the three blind men trying to describe the elephant, and sort of turned on how we view ourselves. So let me share my screen here and show that collection.
I'm super excited to see these.
Well, live up to the hype. Okay, so we should see Lightroom.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, so the collection as a whole, oh, that's not the right view. Which thing do I need to turn on to show that? This one. Okay. No, well, there it is anyway. Okay, well, this is the collection as a whole. It's 10 images, meant to be viewed as 5 pairs of images, or diptychs, depending on how they might be hung. But that's the whole thing. So we can start with the first one. And
now these are in Lightroom, so if you want them viewed as pairs, can you set them up so that we can see them side by side, 2 at a time?
I just have to figure out which bar lets me switch that view. There we go. Okay. So yeah, that would be the first pair. I think it is important to know with this collection that everything here was captured in one exposure in camera. So there's no Photoshop trickery to make these.
So tell me a little bit about the color lights and how you got these.
That is a strand of mini Christmas lights.
Okay.
That were being held by me about 1 inch in front of the lens. And then the rest of it was just getting the background to have the blackness, and then the strobe to light either the far background on the left image or the subject on the right image, to create the areas of blackness and then light.
Interesting. This is so different from everything else you were doing. Tell me a little bit about. It's not like, oh, it's interesting, like as a way of not, so you know me, I'll tell you if I think it's bad. And I don't. It's just, it's so far removed from where we started. So talk to me a little bit about what you're doing and where you're going now. What's this new path? This is a whole different dialect.
Yeah, it is entirely different. There's a few things that go into it. I just found, and as we talked about a little bit during our level 14 critique, that going from level 9 onward, I was kind of struggling with where I saw my art moving, because I think it's fair to say that my technical expertise with being able to pose people to light people and to generate good images is very sufficient for being able to do retail portraiture work. And I felt that I kind of wanted to move beyond that and create some more artistic interpretations of things. Mm-hmm. And at the time, going into Sphere 1, the idea I had of the direction that should go was just totally not appropriate for me. And it took kind of failing at a number of things to really hammer that point home. And then I had to dig into my own taste, my own experiences, lots of art history to kind of come to a point that I thought this is really the way I want to be expressing things. And in level 14, there were definitely images that are in that mode. This is, a little bit of a different look that doesn't necessarily fit with any of those images as a portfolio, but it's just a different aspect of creating artistic interpretations of human experience. And for me, I just happen to want to express that also using the female nude and ideally not using a lot of Photoshop to do it, because I think that's almost too easy.
Well, I love the idea of this series and the sort of juxtaposition between, backlighting and creating the silhouette, and then sort of rim lighting the form and letting you appreciate what's essentially the same thing in different perspectives. It's very unique. This works really well as a series. I could totally see this as art gallery worthy, which is something that you want to sort of step more towards as opposed to doing portraiture or boudoir. So I think that you're definitely in the right area. I would never, ever have come across this image or this collection and been like, I bet that's Tom's new work. I just got off, I just did a hangout with Gretchen, and that's something we talked about a lot through the first 20 levels, was sort of finding your voice and being able to speak that consistency. And I think that we're seeing that with certain people. For most of you, I can pick out whose images or whose now, which is what I'm looking for. But this is, like I said, it's a totally different dialect, which I don't think is bad. I just think that you were very accomplished when you came in, and understood a lot of the technicality and the structure of what language is, so to speak. Like, you understand what the adjectives and the verbs are and how they string together, but you hadn't found your writing style, so to speak. And so I think it actually took you all 20 levels to start exploring to find your voice, which actually really excites me, because I think in the next sphere or two, or moving forward, even not Arcanum related, that we're going to really start to see you center in on what that voice is. My only concerns right now for you stepping into this new genre is that I'm concerned about people being able to pick out your art as your art and know it as yours. So you're going to be a little anonymous for a while, I think, where people won't be able to recognize your art as your calling card. But I also think that some of that is because you haven't quite centered in on it. But I do think that you're getting closer. I'm seeing it more from level 14 and level 19 critiques. How are you feeling about it?
I actually agree entirely. I think that the images from level 14, and actually when I posted the 20 images for level 18, they were split into 10 images that kind of fit together a lot better, and then these 10 images as an entire collection. And kind of what I think is they're both at opposite ends of where I'm supposed to be. So I'm narrowing in on it, kind of bouncing back and forth across that line a little bit. I think it's probably going to take a few shoots to really start to get in on exactly the imagery I should be creating.
Okay. I'm all about you being a photographer too. I think a lot of artists kind of delve between digital artistry and retouching and photography. So I love that you're doing all of this in camera, because I think that almost takes more creativity now. As far as the series as a collection and these being pairs, I think the only thing visually that I'm finding sort of severing between the two is that I think the background of the silhouette shot is so gray in comparison, because of the warmth of the skin tones next to it, that I would have liked to have seen either maybe a warmer background color, or shooting with different white balance so that you were getting some of those warm tones pulled in, even if they are in reverse and we're seeing them on the wall or the backdrop as opposed to the skin. Or in contrast, maybe shooting the ones that are flesh toned in black and white so that they color correlate a little bit better. But I'm more inclined to tell you to warm up the background a little bit, because I like the colors of the flesh tones and the lights coming off of that. And I think some of that would get lost in translation if it was a black and white image. But the negative space, there's just so much of it, and it's so stark with it being like the gray to white in comparison, that I feel like it's getting lost a little bit. They work well as a collection, but I don't think in this one particularly, this series, that if you didn't have the second image to explain the first one, if someone just came across the first one, I don't know that they would even know that that was part of a human figure. Do you know what I mean?
Sure, and that's intentional, to be fair.
Okay.
I actually think the warming the background is probably a good idea, just to bring a little more color cohesion. So I think they probably will play with that.
But I love them side by side together. It almost reminds me of those the optical illusions where it's like, do you see the vase or do you see the two faces? You know what I'm talking about? So I like that it's sort of a impressionistic photography interpretation of that. I think they work really well together as a series. I do like them. Let's move on to the next one, because I'm really excited to see this one. See, now this one I love because on both sides you can tell, you know, that it's a human form and that it's a figure study and a more artistic one. I'm kind of back and forth on the Christmas lights. I love the idea of the lights and that you were playing with them. But I think in this one specifically, that the red is a little bit overwhelming on the silhouetted image. It's just so close and so bright. But I do kind of like that they have this almost universal galaxy kind of feel. Like they have almost this like this planetary orb kind of feel. Like I see solar systems.
Okay. Sure, yeah, I can see that.
Which, you know, we could totally play with like all kinds of puns and be like, oh, her body's just out of this world, you know. But I like the idea and I like the color theory in it. But I really like in the first series of images, the one of her flesh tone is they're further back and away, so they're smaller. And I feel like here they compete with the figure a little bit for attention. Where on the first ones, I feel like they were accentuating the image. Does that make sense?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. But, you know, again, I think that's probably mostly just personal preference and opinion and not necessarily.
Well, I can say from experience that trying to get everything lined up in front of the camera lens in the right composition was challenging, to say the least.
I bet. Yep, I love this series as a series. You're gonna come in and it's interesting because you're getting like the color fall off almost of the lights on the skin tones, and in the other one you're actually getting it on the background, which I think is really interesting. And it looks like a little bit of maybe even motion blur coming from the orange and the red light on the silhouetted one. But I like the abstractness of it. It has a very, I can't even think of what artist it's reminding me of, but it is reminiscent of more of a sort of abstract, impressionistic kind of fine art interpretation. And that's actually really hard to do in photography, especially when you're not relying on Photoshop to give the visual impact. So the fact that you found a way to do this with what is really I'm sure it was difficult to pull off, but ideally it's a very simplistic kind of setup is pretty impressive.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it just needed like 7 or 8 hands, I think, to really get it right. But
clamps all day long, use them for everything. You'd be surprised how often the hardware store comes into my shoots and my props.
Oh, absolutely. And they have the final tear.
Yeah, I love it as a series. I'd be interested to see you do it again for a couple of reasons. One, I'd be interested to see if you did actually mimic the layout with the silhouette so that the lights were in the negative space instead of over the body of the silhouette. But at the same time, I like it that way and that it's giving this sort of silhouetted form. But I would be curious to see it done both ways. I'm not sure how that would impact it because the light is on the negative space then. So I don't know if they would stand out quite as well. The only other thing that I would be interested to see is maybe just pulling the light around just a little bit so that we got some definition on the figure with the silhouettes. Like in this shot, I would love to see that back line of her, I guess it's her legs, right? We're looking at her bum.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like on the right one, we can see very significantly the separation between both of the legs and which is which, whereas we just kind of get the line of the body. So it's a true silhouette. I'd like to see it come around just a little bit, just to give us just a hint of light. So we were still seeing the separation of the body. But again, you might do that. And then I might tell you I like it better this way. But I do think that it's worth at least exploring to see a little bit. I think that would help pull it together. That and the warmth. I really think the warmth would do a lot with the background color. But I think those two elements would really pull it together as a series. But I do think that it's a very strong series, and it's probably one of the best cohesive collections that I've seen as a full series put together. Like we sat down and we did Lars when we did his gallery show, and Gretchen's is pretty good as well. But looking at full portfolios, you know, this is a series shot together, and I think that's pretty impressive considering you don't shoot often, and this is sort of a new genre for you, delving into fine art and series work as opposed to portraiture.
Right. Yeah. It was definitely a shift in perspective.
So you have this series. So now what? What's next for you? Where are you seeing this going? No pressure.
Yeah. There are a lot of things I really like about the way this series came together, but there are some things that I'm not sure that I'm in love with.
Okay.
The compositions I used, I think, are either too abstract or not abstract enough. I kind of think that, like that third pairing of the torso, it's much more clear on both images what it really is, whereas with most of the rest of them, even the skin shot, it's a little, you have some question as to what part of the body you'd be looking at there. And I kind of think the series should either be really abstract, where you can tell it's skin, but you're not sure what any of it is, or I kind of think it should all be, somewhat identifiable, more like the traditional bodyscape type compositions. That's something that I didn't see until after I shot the whole thing and I was looking at it put together. Go
ahead.
I was gonna say I'm just a little. I think it's a little unbalanced from that point of view.
I agree with you. I do think that if we had to pick pieces that didn't fit. I think that the third set of the torso and probably the last set are the two that are most easily identifiable. The rest of them you can kind of guess, but you could also make the argument for it being something else. As far as that goes, that would really depend on you deciding which you want it to be necessarily. I can tell you that in the third one, you know, obviously the biggest giveaway is the nipple because that's only on one part of the body, ideally.
Right.
So, you know, it may just be a matter of going in and just cropping it right below the edge of that so that you were just getting the line of the torso and like the under boob and not actually having that in there. That would make that one a lot more abstract where it would fall in line more with the rest of the images. The other thing that you can do if you're looking to make it abstract would really be working to put her in poses that people are not in normally. So like we're looking at the shoulder and the line of the hips. And so if we were doing a close-up where we were just cutting in right here, this is where you normally see the shoulder and the line of the hips. So pulling that in and away and tilting where her body is would start to give different lines that we don't normally see it at, that I think would start to make it more of an abstract and make it more difficult to easily discern. Same thing with any other part of the body. Instead of having it be the line of her hips, having her sit and pull her knees around each other and twisting limbs around each other will all help to make it more visually complicated and not as easily recognizable.
Yeah, just I think with the concept for this shoot, actually largely being inspired by the use of the lights, having that sort of complicated shape to the body would have made it much more difficult to incorporate the black fields,
right?
Because the lines would be much more complicated. So for this one, I definitely wanted to keep a fairly simple graphic, you know, almost very graphical mid-century kind of a composition to it.
Yeah. And you could still do that, but play with it. Like these are all vertical images too. So having her, even if you were still doing the same lines of the body, it would definitely change the look by just rotating the images. Or if you're doing it in camera, you know, rotating her, having her lay on her side, even though it's still the hip, it would have put the lights above her or below her. Things like that. I do agree that in this one, I like the simplicity and I like the contrast between the shadows and the light and the light colors being in it as well. So I would be more inclined to just tell you to maybe consider recropping that third series to be less telltale. Because if you're looking for it to be easily recognizable as body parts, then that's exactly how you do it. You look for things like, you know, your belly buttons and your ears and, you know, toes and nails and things that are only on certain parts of the body that would, you know, not leave to the imagination which part it is, which, right, you know, is exactly what we have in the third image. And that's just figure studies. But this series specifically, I think it works better, a little more abstract. So I'd be inclined to just change the crop and have it crop like right at the bottom of the curve of the breast and just do down. That way people can still kind of jump right to what it is, but it leaves it more smooth lines without any visual break. Because you're also getting, that's also the only image that you're getting any real color differentiation, because ideally most people's skin follows a similar flesh tone. That's a stark color contrast too in the flesh, which may be part of the other reason that it's standing out. And that plus, you know, if we're being totally honest, boobs. Like everybody's going to go right to that one anyway because they're naked breasts.
Well, sometimes that's okay.
Mm-hmm. I'm fine with that. I make my living off of boobs. I'm just saying that will always be the image that will draw everybody. Like if you put it online and you watch the views as a collection, that one will get 10 times the views of anything else, you know, just because it is. Sure. So it just depends on how you want to cater it. But I like this one more as an abstract thing. And really my only critique for this series is that I think it would be stronger if the negative space of the silhouettes were warmed up a little and not quite so gray.
Okay, well, I will definitely give that shot in Photoshop and see how that works.
So now what are you doing with these images? Are you still, or where do we go from here? Are we still looking to do this um, as a career, or are you playing right now? Are you just kind of finding your voice? How are you feeling?
I'm a little, I guess I'm a little in between. I'm not sure that I love the idea of necessarily taking this collection to a gallery. And maybe that's just because I'm an artist and I'm never satisfied with the work I do. But
Right.
definitely, I'm taking ideas from this shoot and some of the other shoots and planning some more ideas. Just to continue building that body of work. I'm still also shooting boudoir work, so I don't know that I'm necessarily going to stop that because I do enjoy it. But I have looked at ways to make it easier to deal with the client side of it and kind of reduce the amount of effort that I have to put into just the scheduling and dealing with album layouts and all that kind of annoying stuff. So,
Why don't you just stop doing albums?
oh well, I like doing albums. I just don't like
Okay.
having to deal with clients having a voice in the albums.
Well,
So
then don't get them one.
that's exactly what I'm doing. Is I just have to make sure that my wife realizes that. So when she talks to people, that she doesn't ever say that you get to have any approval or anything, because
Okay.
that happened last time. Is we're sitting in a meeting and I'm like, here's the pictures. What do you think? We go through it. And she's like, and then we'll send you an album proof. And I'm like, no, I don't. But too late. Too late. She'd already promised it. So.
Yeah. Well, if that's what you were doing, it's just going to take a little bit of time to retrain both of you in what it is. But
Right.
I don't think there's any problem with that. I actually advocate for that. They hire you as an artist and a professional for your voice, so they should trust your voice from the time the shutter fires until they get the completed images. And if you're a studio that's doing albums, then the album is part of the art presentation, and the way that you decide to lay it out and which images look right on the page next to each other, that all comes in with your artistic interpretation. For me, an album is one big piece of art made up of your smaller pieces of art. So it should be you handling that and putting that together for them start to finish. So especially if they're driving you nuts with it. Like, I'm a big advocate of, if you don't like it, take it away and don't offer it. You don't have to give them anything,
Right.
know? So,
Right.
okay. So what else do we need to get rid of? What else are you not liking?
Well, marketing. I don't really enjoy that, but I don't think you can really avoid that one. That's just a necessity of the business world. Is you have to have relationships with people and a presence in their minds. One way or another.
Your studio does, but you could always look at hiring somebody else to do your marketing for you. I know a lot of studios that are very successful and have somebody, especially if your wife is handling client sales. If she likes doing that kind of stuff, let her roll with it. You can just be the artist in the studio that they get to see the day that they come in and shoot.
That's where I would like to go. I just have to now get Ember on board with that.
Okay. Well, is that all she's doing right now, is working for you, or is she?
Oh no, she has a full-time job and she's
Okay.
working on her own projects. So
Have we considered maybe bringing in a third and having somebody else work for you that isn't otherwise engaged?
when I can pay for somebody, I probably will. But right now, I'm not profitable enough.
Well, what if they worked on commission?
That's something that we've talked about, but just we're fairly certain we're going to be moving in the next couple of months.
Okay.
So my focus really hasn't been on building a lot of business and the infrastructure for that. I've really just been spending this year on trying to build a new portfolio and do work that I want to do. And I'm taking clients that come to me. I'm not like going out and doing a lot to build that. So I think it's definitely going to be, 6 months from now or a year, whatever it ends up being, when we're settled somewhere, that there's going to be need to be a pretty large shift from the status quo.
Okay. So what's next for you in your mind then? What do you feel the focus needs to be from this point out?
I am I'm gonna continue to shoot fine artwork. Uh, that's personally where the focus is, and everything else is going to fit around that. So I
Okay.
have like 4 people who are interested in doing some work like this, and actually just ordered some props this morning
Nice.
to do one. So it's just gonna be a matter of coming up with the concepts and scheduling them out and moving forward there. And as far as the art, that's the focus. Um, and in terms of business, I definitely would like to have a couple of portfolios that I could go to, a gallery in a couple of years. I don't know if you really paid attention, but in my posts I explained there's exactly one gallery in Iowa that even shows portraiture at all. So there's not a big art world here to tap into anyway. So I think it's good to spend the time and build it up, and then in the future be able to come into it with a lot more surety and speed.
Well, as far as the galleries go, one, I don't think you should get stuck on a local mindset because I have a lot of friends that have gallery shows all over their country and in different countries all over the world. So you do not have to be where your art is. So just something to keep in mind. Um, I think that you are spot on. And I think that because we're adults, we feel like our validation comes in our ability to prove our worth through financial gain. So when people are paying us, then we are spending our time well. And I'm not the biggest advocate for that. We have bills we have to pay and people we love that we have to take care of. I understand that. And I completely advocate for that. But your worth as an artist does not come in solely based on somebody else paying you for that work. That's something that's within you. So I'm all about you taking the next couple of months, especially if you're planning on moving and getting settled somewhere new and not really looking to book out for 6 months because you might not be here.
Right.
I think you're spot on. I think you're right where you should be, and all you should be doing for the next couple of months is focusing on continuing that path for your voice, because I feel like you're in a little bit of uncharted territory. So I think the next couple of months are going to be a lot of exploration for you, where you're going to be um, really sort of figuring out not only what you have to say, but how you want to say it, and where that artistic language comes in. Because if you go back and look over all of your critiques, there's 4 different artists that show up to each of the 4 critiques. And
Yeah,
they're
that's true.
very different work. And what you want to do and what you're expressing as your interest is very different. From level 14 to level 19, you're still on the same kind of track, which I think we've at least gotten in the right direction. Like we found your north. We just don't know how far north you're going and where specifically, if we're veering a little northwest or northeast or, going true north. So I think spreading out and sort of filling in your map and figuring out the things that you want to do and the things that you don't want to do are just as important, because that teaches you where not to go, which is good. And I think that a lot of your first 20 levels were kind of spent figuring out what you don't want to do. And that's
Yep.
not a bad thing, because if you ruled out that you don't want to go south and you don't want to go east, you've just ruled out half the map. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think that's a good thing. So I would like to see some more work for you, even though you're at level 19 and moving up, and we can take you out and put you in the level 20 lounge. I'd still like you to be in the community and just kind of drop me a line and keep me posted on what you're doing.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think you should be an artist in the truest form and just explore and express and figure out what it is you have to say, because I think you're going to surprise yourself a little bit with how much is actually in you and how far removed it is from what you thought was the
Oh
path
yeah.
you were going.
Oh yeah.
Um,
It's a surprise.
So I set 19 levels for you and leave level 20 open for you to set for yourself. How are you feeling getting all the way through sphere 1 now and where you're at?
I think that Sphere One has been really valuable in providing a framework to have to do all the hard work. Uh, it provides that sort of accountability that
Mhm.
that no other system really outside of like a college can do. Because you can be in 50 Facebook groups and say, "Hey, I took this photo. Can you guys give me a critique?" And people can tell you stuff, but there's nothing that forces you to have to confront whether that's really the kind of work you ought to be doing. Is it really saying what you want to say, or are you just copying a style that you see from everywhere else? And that's fine in terms of being able to deliver images to clients and being able to build technical skill, but it doesn't really provide for that deep growth, that really confronting the hard questions of what the hell is all of this even about for you,
Yeah.
that that something like the Arcanum can do, and especially with your spheres where everyone had such individualized paths, and that's so invaluable. It really
Good.
has been.
Well, and it's tough. I asked a lot of all of you, and I lost quite a few of you in Sphere 1 as a result of that, because it's not just accountability, um, to your teacher or your master, however you want to define it, but it's you having to do the work and you really having to decide your own path. Like, you came to me twice and said, look, I know we sat down and said this is what sphere 1's going to be, but I don't want to do that anymore. And I want to go over here. And can we change this? And then we sat down at your level 14 critique and it was adapting. So the path that you started out on and that we built through sphere 1 totally changed for you and ended up way out in left field when we were going to right field initially, which I'm fine with. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. In fact, I think that that's something that I wish more people would have the courage to do, because I think that people feel like once they commit to something, that if they let go of it, that that's somehow a failure. And it's not. You can be charging full speed ahead, but if you're going in the wrong direction, kind of defeats the purpose. So I think it was very brave of you to be self-aware enough to see, as you started out, that you were going the wrong way, and to sort of you turn around and get back onto a different course that could take you closer to where you were meant to be. And that, I think that caused you to work a little harder than most of the other people that had their path, or at least want to keep pursuing it longer before they decide it's not their path, because you sort of had to backtrack and then recover all the ground that you backtracked from and then go off in a totally different uncharted direction. So it's been very inspiring to watch how devoted you are. And I think that once we hit your stride and you find where you are going to be, you're just going to take off. And it's going to be really fun to watch and be like, he was in my cohort first.
I appreciate that, Jessica. That's very nice to hear.
Okay, so you're at level 19 and you passed your level 19 critique, which means you're ready to go up to the level 20 lounge as soon as you give the word. Do you feel like there's anything else that you want to accomplish before you leave JLark?
I think the only thing left on the map was to leave some words of wisdom for the next group.
Yes.
So I'll be posting that this afternoon.
Okay.
And then everyone can ignore it because I write things that are way too long. So
that's okay. I do too, and they are all still in the group. So that's a great idea. And then the only other thing that you have to do that's sort of ceremonial is that at all the different levels, I kind of rename you and give you little appellations and titles as you go on. So since you are leaving JLark, it is your responsibility to pick your own title to carry forth into Sphere 2. So give some thought to that. And when you have it, just leave it in your Sphere 1 thing. And I will level you up and you can join the Sphere 2 ranks.
Okay, that sounds great.
Awesome.
And
all right.
Offline, if we could just have 2 quick minutes.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's it. We'll end the broadcast.
Okay.